Commander Velthara stood at the observation deck of her ship, staring at the small blue and green planet below. Her forearms moved across the control panel with practiced ease. She had studied many new species before, but something felt different about this assignment. The Galactic Council had sent her to watch these creatures called humans. They wanted to know if humans were dangerous. The ship Serenity's Edge hung invisible in space, hidden by the best technology the Altarian Republic could build. Velthara's purple skin glowed softly in the dim light of the bridge. Her large black eyes could see things that would be invisible to most species. She had been doing this job for 20 years. She was good at it. "Commander," said her assistant, a young Altarian named Kexvo, "we are receiving new orders from the Council." Velthara read the message on her screen. The humans had built their first colony on a planet outside their home system. The planet was far from Earth, in a system the humans called Kepler 442. The humans had named their colony New Sol. The Council wanted her to go there and watch them work. Interesting, Velthara said to herself. Most species built their first colonies close to home. These humans had traveled much farther than expected. It showed either bravery or stupidity. Time would tell which one. The journey to the human colony took 3 days. Velthara spent the time reading everything the Council knew about humans. They were a young species, only recently discovering how to travel between stars. They had one home planet called Earth. They fought many wars among themselves, but recently they had started working together. What worried the Council was how fast humans learned new things. In just 50 years, they had gone from simple rockets to ships that could travel faster than light. They had also started changing the environment of planets to make them suitable for human life. This was called terraforming. Most species took hundreds of years to learn terraforming. Humans had done it in 10. When they arrived at the human colony, Velthara was surprised by what she saw. The colony was much larger than she expected. The humans had built a city with over 2,000 people. They had farms, factories, and even schools. Children played in parks while adults worked on strange machines. "Activate the observation protocols," Velthara ordered. Immediately, her ship's sensors began recording everything. She could see inside buildings, listen to conversations, and track every human in the colony. The colony's leader was a man named Deho. He had been a soldier on Earth before becoming governor of New Sol. Velthara watched him walk through the colony, talking to people and checking on their work. He seemed to care about every person under his command. This was unusual. Most leaders Velthara had studied cared more about results than people. Deho worked with a woman named Mira. She was the chief engineer, responsible for building and maintaining everything in the colony. Velthara watched Mira solve problem after problem with creative solutions. When the water purification system broke down, Mira built a new one using parts from 3 different machines. When a building's foundation cracked, she reinforced it with a metal foam that she invented on the spot. The head of security was a man called Taimin. He had been a soldier like Deho. Every day he trained the colonists in basic fighting skills. Even the doctors and teachers learned how to use weapons. Velthara found this strange. The colony was in a safe part of space. There were no dangerous species nearby. Why did these humans prepare for war when there was no enemy? The colony's doctor was a woman named So Young. She was also a scientist who studied alien life. Velthara was impressed by her intelligence. So Young had discovered 3 new types of bacteria on the planet and had already figured out how to use them to improve crop growth. She worked 18 hours a day, stopping only to eat and sleep. What fascinated Velthara most was how the humans worked together. On her home planet, different groups often competed with each other. They shared information only when forced to. But these humans shared everything freely. If one person solved a problem, they immediately taught everyone else the solution. She watched a young engineer named Junseo struggling with a communication device. Instead of asking his supervisor for help, he asked Mira directly. Mira stopped her own work and spent 2 hours teaching Junseo how to fix the device. Then she made sure he understood the theory behind the repair, so he could fix similar problems in the future. The humans also showed emotions much more openly than other species Velthara had studied. They laughed when they were happy, cried when they were sad, and became angry when things went wrong. At first, she thought this made them weak. Emotional species usually made poor decisions, but the humans seemed to use their emotions to motivate themselves to work harder. During her first week of observation, Velthara saw humans work for 14 hours straight to save crops during a drought. They could have let some crops die and saved energy. Instead, they worked until every plant was safe. When a child got sick, the entire medical team worked around the clock until the child recovered. No other species she knew would spend so much effort on one individual. The humans also did strange things in their free time. They created art, told stories, and played games. They sang songs and danced together. Velthara's people had given up such activities long ago as inefficient. But the humans seemed to need these activities to stay happy and productive. After 2 weeks of watching, Velthara was beginning to understand why the council was concerned. These humans were different from any species she had studied. They were emotional, but they used emotions as strength. They were individuals, but they worked together perfectly. They were peaceful, but they prepared for war. Most importantly, they never gave up. When machines broke, they fixed them. When problems seemed impossible, they found solutions. When crops failed, they planted new ones. Other species would have given up and asked for help from their home planet. These humans just worked harder. Velthara was writing her daily report when the ship's alarms began to sound. Her assistant Kexvo ran to the sensor station. "Commander," he shouted. "We have incoming ships on long-range sensors. 37 vessels approaching from the outer system." Velthara felt her blood turn cold. She recognized the ship designs immediately. They belonged to the Kethmaran, a species of raiders who attacked weak colonies. They captured inhabitants to sell as slaves and stole everything valuable they could find. The Kethmaran were heading straight for New Sol. They would arrive in 3 days. The human colony had no military ships, no orbital defenses, and no way to escape. In 3 days, every human in the colony would be dead or enslaved. Velthara stared at the peaceful colony below. Governor Deho was in a meeting with his staff. Engineer Mira was teaching children about solar panels. Dr. So-Young was treating a patient with a broken arm. None of them knew that death was coming. According to Galactic Council law, Velthara could not interfere. She was an observer, not a protector. Her job was to watch and report, nothing more. But as she looked at the humans going about their daily lives, she felt something she had never experienced before. She felt responsible for their safety. Velthara spent the night thinking about what to do. The Galactic Council's rules were clear. She could not warn the humans about the coming attack. She could not help them fight. She could not even reveal that she was watching them. All she could do was observe and record what happened. But these rules felt wrong. The humans had done nothing to deserve what was coming. They were peaceful colonists trying to build a new life. The Kethmaran were raiders and murderers. How could she just watch while innocent people died? By morning, Velthara had made her decision. She would follow the rules, but she would record everything. If the humans died, at least the galaxy would know how they faced their end. Maybe their story would help other species prepare for similar attacks. At sunrise on the second day, something unexpected happened. The human colony's automated defense systems detected the approaching Kethmoran fleet. Velthara watched the sensors in the colony's communication center light up with warnings. She expected panic, confusion, and desperate attempts to call for help. Instead, Governor Deho calmly activated what the humans called emergency protocols. Within minutes, every human in the colony received the same message on their communication devices. The message was simple: unknown hostile fleet approaching. Estimated arrival in 2 days. All citizens report to designated emergency stations. We stand together. Velthara was amazed by what happened next. Instead of running in fear, the humans began to organize. They did not try to evacuate. They did not send desperate messages begging for rescue. They prepared to fight. Mira, the chief engineer, immediately began converting civilian equipment into military hardware. She took mining drills and turned them into weapons. She converted construction vehicles into mobile gun platforms. She even modified the colony's power generators to overload on command, creating massive explosions if needed. Velthara watched Mira work with a team of engineers, moving with incredible speed and efficiency. They worked for 18 hours straight, stopping only for quick meals and brief rest periods. In 1 day, they transformed a peaceful colony into a fortress. Security Chief Taimin organized every adult colonist into defensive units. Teachers, doctors, farmers, and shopkeepers all learned how to fight. Children too young to fight were assigned to help with communications and medical support. Even the oldest colonists found ways to contribute. What surprised Velthara most was how the humans treated this crisis. Other species she had observed would have been terrified. They would have spent time arguing about what to do or blaming each other for the situation, but these humans seemed almost calm. They worked together with a determination she had never seen before. Dr. So-young set up multiple medical stations throughout the colony. She trained every adult in basic first aid and surgery. She also did something that confused Velthara at first. So-young began studying the psychological profiles of the Kethmoran species, looking for ways to use fear as a weapon against them. Fear is just another tool, So-young explained to her medical team. If we understand what scares them, we can use that knowledge to our advantage. Communications Officer Jun Seo sent a message toward Earth, knowing that help could not arrive in time. The message was not a plea for rescue. Instead, Jun Seo sent detailed information about the Kethmoran fleet, their weapons, and their attack patterns. He wanted Earth to learn from whatever happened at New Seoul. Belthara noticed that the humans did other strange things while preparing for battle. They made recordings for their families back on Earth. But these were not goodbye messages filled with sadness. Instead, the humans talked about their hopes for the future and their love for their home planet. They spoke as if they expected to survive, even though they were facing impossible odds. A teacher named Young-soo recorded a message for his students on Earth. "I want you to remember that courage is not the absence of fear," he said. "Courage is doing what is right even when you are afraid. Today we will show the galaxy what human courage looks like." A farmer named Dong-wook began destroying food stores and contaminating water supplies that the enemy might use. Other species would have tried to hide these resources. But Dong-wook wanted to make sure the Kethmoran gained nothing from their attack, even if they won. Weapons specialist Hye-jin worked day and night converting civilian technology into military equipment. She took kitchen knives and turned them into spears. She converted fertilizer into explosives. She even found ways to weaponize farming equipment and construction tools. Belthara began to understand that the humans were not just preparing to defend themselves. They were preparing to make the Kethmoran pay a terrible price for their attack. Every building, every piece of equipment, every human life was being turned into a weapon. On the evening of the second day, Governor Daeho called a meeting with all the colony's leaders. Belthara listened to their conversation, expecting to hear fear or desperation. Instead, she heard something that chilled her to the bone. "We all know the odds," Daeho said quietly. "We have 2,000 civilians against a fleet of experienced raiders. They have better weapons, better armor, and more soldiers. By any logical calculation, we should surrender and hope they treat us mercifully." Mira laughed bitterly. "The Kethmoran do not know the meaning of mercy. They will kill the old and weak, enslave the strong, and sell our children to the highest bidder. Then we make sure they regret coming here," Taemin said. "We cannot win this battle, but we can make them remember it for the rest of their lives." Dr. So-young nodded in agreement. "Every human who dies will take as many raiders with them as possible. Every building they capture will be booby-trapped. Every victory they achieve will cost them more than they gain." Velthara realized that the humans had already accepted that they would probably die. But instead of giving up, this acceptance had made them more dangerous. They were not fighting to win. They were fighting to inflict maximum damage on their enemies. Young-soo, the teacher, spoke up. "We should think about the message we are sending. Other human colonies will hear about what happens here. The people of Earth will learn about our fight." "What do we want them to learn?" "That humans do not surrender," Daeho replied. "That we do not go quietly into the dark. That anyone who threatens innocent humans will pay a price they never expected." Jun Seo had been working on the communication systems all day. "I have set up recorders throughout the colony," he reported. "Everything that happens during the battle will be transmitted back to Earth. Our people will know exactly how we fought and how we died." Hye-jin checked her weapons one last time. "I have placed explosives in every major building. If we lose ground, we can deny the enemy the use of our infrastructure. They will capture ruins, not a working colony." As the meeting ended, Velthara watched the humans return to their preparations. There was no panic, no despair, no arguing about strategy. They moved with the calm efficiency of people who had accepted their fate and chosen to face it with dignity. That night, many humans recorded final messages for their loved ones. But these messages were unlike anything Velthara had ever heard. Instead of saying goodbye, the humans talked about their pride in being part of the colony. They spoke about their hope that their sacrifice would protect other humans in the future. A young mother, named Yunji recorded a message for her, "Daughter on Earth. I want you to grow up knowing that your mother fought for something important," she said. "I fought for the idea that humans can live anywhere in the galaxy. I fought for your right to reach for the stars." Belthara found herself deeply moved by these messages. Her own people had long ago decided that individual lives were less important than the survival of the species. They would have evacuated the colony or surrendered to the raiders. But these humans were choosing to fight for abstract concepts like honor and freedom. As dawn approached on the third day, the Kethmaran fleet appeared on the horizon. Belthara watched Governor Deho stand on the colony's main tower, looking up at the approaching ships. Then he activated the colony's communication system and broadcast a message that could be heard throughout the star system. "Attention, Kethmaran fleet," Deho said in a calm, clear voice. "You are approaching the sovereign territory of the human colony of New Sol. You are not welcome here. I advise you to change course immediately and leave this system." The response came quickly from the Kethmaran fleet commander. "Surrender your colony and prepare for processing. Resistance will result in the death of all inhabitants." Governor Deho was quiet for a long moment. Then he replied with words that would echo throughout the galaxy for years to come. "Then you will learn today what it costs to threaten humans. We do not surrender. We do not retreat. And we do not forgive those who harm innocents. Come if you dare, but know that this will not be the easy conquest you expect." The Kethmaran fleet continued its approach, confident in their superior numbers and firepower. But Belthara, who had been watching the humans prepare for 3 days, knew that the raiders had no idea what they were about to face. The humans were ready for war. The attack began at sunrise. Belthara watched from her hidden ship as the Kethmaran fleet took positions around the planet. Warlord Gextar, the fleet commander, was confident this would be a quick victory. He had defeated dozens of colonies before. None had ever given him serious resistance. The first Kethmaran bombardment targeted what appeared to be the colony's main defenses. Weapons platforms, communication towers, and government buildings disappeared in bright flashes of plasma fire. Gextar expected the humans to surrender immediately after this show of force. Instead, the humans revealed their first surprise. The buildings that had been destroyed were decoys, hastily constructed fake targets designed to waste enemy ammunition. The real defenses were hidden underground and throughout the colony's civilian areas. Mira had spent 3 days turning New Sol into a maze of hidden weapons and traps. Every building, every street, every piece of infrastructure had been modified for war. What looked like a peaceful colony was actually an integrated fortress designed to bleed the attackers with every step they took. The Kethmaran ground forces landed expecting easy conquest. Instead, they found themselves fighting for every meter of ground. Taman had divided his defenders into small teams that struck quickly and then disappeared. They used the colony's underground tunnels to move unseen, appearing suddenly to attack and then vanishing before the enemy could respond. Belthara watched in fascination as the human strategy unfolded. Other species fought battles to control territory. The humans fought to destroy enemies. They did not try to hold ground. Instead, they made the Kethmaran pay an impossible price for every building, every street, every room they captured. Weapons specialist Hyjin had positioned snipers throughout the colony. They used converted communication towers and modified building structures as shooting positions. Each sniper was equipped with weapons built from mining equipment and construction tools. When Kethmaran soldiers approached a building, they were shot from multiple directions by enemies they could not see. The most terrifying part of the human defense was their willingness to sacrifice themselves for tactical advantage. Communications officer Jun Seo had been defending the main radio station with a team of 6 volunteers. When a Kethmaran assault team broke through their defenses, Jun Seo did something that shocked both Belthara and the enemy soldiers. Instead of retreating, Jun Seo called for artillery fire on his own position. "This is Station 7, he transmitted calmly. "Enemy forces have overrun our position. Request immediate bombardment at grid reference 7-7 Alpha, danger close. Send it." Mira, controlling the artillery from the engineering center, hesitated for only a moment. Then she fired converted mining charges directly at Jun Seo's position. The explosion killed Jun Seo and his team, but it also eliminated the entire Kethmaran assault squad. More importantly, it sent a message to every enemy soldier. Humans would kill themselves to kill their enemies. Dr. So Young used her medical knowledge in ways that horrified Velthara. She had studied Kethmoran psychology and physiology, identifying their deepest fears and physical weaknesses. So Young coordinated psychological warfare tactics that left enemy soldiers terrified to enter certain areas of the colony. She also turned the medical stations into traps. When wounded Kethmoran soldiers approached expecting easy targets, they found medical personnel who fought with the same intensity as trained soldiers. So Young herself killed 3 enemy warriors using surgical instruments as weapons. Agricultural manager Dong Wook had converted farming chemicals into area denial weapons. He created toxic clouds that forced enemy soldiers to avoid entire sections of the colony. He also used his knowledge of the local ecosystem to turn native plants and animals into obstacles for the attacking forces. But what truly disturbed Velthara was how the humans treated their own wounded and dying. In most species, injured individuals became liabilities that slowed down the fighting force. But these humans turned their casualties into weapons. A teacher named Young-soo had been critically wounded while defending a school. Instead of accepting medical treatment, he insisted on being placed at a strategic choke point where he could continue fighting. Using improvised weapons and pure determination, Young-soo held off 12 Kethmoran warriors for over an hour before finally succumbing to his injuries. Even more disturbing was how the humans used their children. Yoonji, the child psychologist, had organized the younger colonists into a support network that was frighteningly effective. Children as young as 10 years old served as messengers, medics, and spotters for the adult fighters. They moved through areas too dangerous for adults, carrying supplies and information with a courage that seemed impossible. When a group of Kethmoran soldiers cornered 15 children in a school basement, the children did not surrender or cry for help. Instead, they triggered explosives that Heejin had placed throughout the building. The explosion killed the children, but it also eliminated an entire enemy squad and denied the raiders use of the school as a base. The Kethmoran forces began to understand that they were not fighting a normal battle. Every human, from the oldest adult to the youngest child, was willing to die to hurt their enemies. There were no non-combatants, no safe areas, no easy victories. Every room could be a trap. Every civilian could be a fighter. Every building could be a bomb. Warlord Gextar, watching the battle from his command ship, could not understand what was happening. His forces had superior numbers, better weapons, and more experience. But after 6 hours of fighting, they had captured less than 10% of the colony and had lost over 40% of their ground troops. The humans were using tactics that violated every principle of rational warfare. They destroyed their own infrastructure to deny it to the enemy. They sacrificed valuable personnel to achieve minor tactical advantages. They spent resources inefficiently and fought battles they could not win. But somehow these irrational tactics were working. The Kethmoran forces were becoming demoralized and confused. They had expected to face terrified civilians begging for mercy. Instead, they found determined fighters who seemed to welcome death as long as they could take enemies with them. Mira demonstrated this mindset when her engineering center came under direct attack. Instead of trying to evacuate her equipment and personnel, she began systematically destroying everything that might be useful to the enemy. She triggered explosions that collapsed tunnels, overloaded power systems to create electrical hazards, and released toxic chemicals that made entire areas uninhabitable. When Kethmoran soldiers finally broke into the engineering center, they found Mira alone, wounded but still working at her control station. She looked up at the enemy soldiers and smiled. "Too late," she said, and activated the final explosion. The blast destroyed the engineering center and killed Mira, along with the attacking soldiers. But more importantly, it eliminated the colony's main infrastructure, ensuring that even if the Kethmoran won the battle, they would capture nothing of value. Taemin led the final organized resistance from the colony's administrative center. With only 23 security personnel remaining, he faced over 200 enemy soldiers. Any rational commander would have surrendered or attempted to negotiate. Instead, Taemin led his people in a direct assault against the Kethmoran positions. They attacked with weapons cobbled together from civilian equipment, wearing improvised armor made from construction materials. They fought with the desperate intensity of people who had nothing left to lose. The charge should have been suicidal. But the humans had become so unpredictable and dangerous that the Kethmoran soldiers hesitated, confused by an enemy that seemed to court death. In that moment of hesitation, Taemin and his team inflicted devastating casualties before finally being overwhelmed. As night fell, the Kethmoran forces controlled most of the colony, but their victory felt hollow. They had lost over 60% of their ground troops. Their remaining soldiers were traumatized and demoralized. They had captured a colony that was mostly rubble and ruins. Warlord Gextar stood in the ruins of Governor Daeho's office, looking at the destruction around him. This should have been a moment of triumph. Instead, he felt a cold fear growing in his mind. These humans were not like any species he had ever fought. They did not value their own lives above victory. They did not seek to minimize casualties or preserve resources. They fought as if death was preferable to defeat, as if causing enemy casualties was more important than their own survival. For the first time in his career, Gextar began to wonder if this victory was worth the cost. His fleet had been significantly weakened. His reputation among other raiders would suffer when they learned how much he had lost conquering a single undefended colony. But what truly worried him were the reports from his surviving soldiers. They spoke of humans who fought like demons, who turned their own deaths into weapons, who seemed to feel no fear of pain or death. Some of his warriors were requesting transfers to other units, unwilling to face humans in battle again. As Gextar prepared to declare victory, his communication officer brought him disturbing news. Long-range sensors had detected human ships approaching from the direction of Earth, not rescue ships, but warships. The humans were not coming to negotiate or... Warlord Gextar made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Standing in the ruins of New Sol, surrounded by the bodies of his own soldiers and the human defenders, he chose to finish what he had started. The approaching human fleet would arrive in 2 days. He would not give them a colony to retake or survivors to rescue. Begin orbital bombardment, he ordered. Destroy everything. Leave nothing for the humans to find. Velthera watched in horror as plasma beams began falling from the sky like deadly rain. The Kethmoran fleet poured devastating firepower onto the colony, turning buildings into vapor and streets into glowing craters. Any human who had survived the ground battle would die in the bombardment. But the humans had one final surprise prepared, something that Velthara had not expected, and that would change the galaxy forever. Deep beneath the colony, in reinforced bunkers that had survived both the battle and the initial bombardment, Mira's greatest creation continued to function. Before her death, she had built something unprecedented, a fusion-powered transmission array capable of broadcasting across half the galaxy. As the orbital bombardment intensified, Governor Daeho activated the array from his underground command center. The transmission began immediately, sending everything that had happened at New Sol to every inhabited system within 50 light years. The dying colony became a broadcast station, transmitting the complete story of the battle to dozens of civilizations. Every act of human courage, every Kethmoran atrocity, every moment of the 3-day siege was recorded and transmitted in real time. Dr. So Young, working from a collapsing medical bunker, provided scientific commentary on what was happening. She explained human tactics, analyzed Kethmoran weaknesses, and documented everything that future human forces would need to know about their enemy. To whoever receives this transmission, So Young said as plasma fire raged overhead, learn from our deaths, study our tactics, remember our sacrifice, and when you fight these raiders, show them no mercy. Taemin, mortally wounded but still alive in a security bunker, used his final hours to provide detailed intelligence about Kethmoran military capabilities. He identified their weapons, their armor weaknesses, their command structure, and their psychological vulnerabilities. They fear close combat, Taemin reported as explosions shook his bunker. They rely on superior firepower and numbers. When forced to fight at close range, they panic. Use this knowledge. Make them pay for what they did here. The transmission included something that would become legendary throughout the galaxy, Governor Daeho's final speech. As the command bunker collapsed around him, he spoke directly to the human fleet that was still 2 days away. This is Governor Daeho of New Sol Colony, he said, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. If you are receiving this message, then we have failed to defend our home. But our failure is also your victory. We have shown the galaxy what these raiders truly are. We have documented their crimes. We have proven that humans will not surrender to evil. The bombardment continued for 6 hours, but the transmission never stopped. Even as bunkers collapsed and equipment failed, backup systems continued broadcasting. Mira had built redundancy into every component, ensuring that the story of New Soul would reach its intended audience. Young Su, the teacher, used his final moments to record educational materials for children throughout the galaxy. "Learn from this," he said as fire consumed his hiding place. "Learn that courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination to do what is right despite fear. Learn that freedom is worth any price. Learn that humans do not abandon each other." Yoonji, the child psychologist, recorded messages specifically for human children who would hear about New Soul. "We chose to fight so that you could live in freedom," she said. "We chose to die so that you would know the price of liberty. When you grow up, remember that your freedom was bought with our blood." The most powerful part of the transmission was not the words, but the images. Every act of human sacrifice, every moment of impossible courage, every example of people choosing death over surrender was captured and broadcast. The galaxy saw humans who fought to their last breath, who turned their own deaths into weapons, who never asked for mercy or offered surrender. As the final bunkers collapsed, Dongwook transmitted agricultural data that would help future human colonies. Junseo sent communication protocols that would improve defensive coordination. Haijin provided weapons specifications that could be used to arm other settlements. Even in death, the humans of New Soul continued to fight. Their final act was not revenge or hatred, but an attempt to help other humans survive future attacks. The transmission ended 26 hours after it began. New Soul was gone, erased from the surface of the planet. All 2,847 colonists were dead. The Kethmoran fleet had achieved total victory. But within hours, the New Soul transmission began reaching other civilizations. The Altarian Republic received it first, followed by the Centauri Federation, the Vegan Collective, and dozens of smaller species. Every government, every military leader, every citizen who saw the transmission had the same reaction. Shock followed by a deep, fundamental fear. Velthara found herself crying as she watched the final moments of the transmission. Her species had abandoned emotional responses thousands of years ago, as inefficient and primitive. But seeing the humans of New Soul die with such dignity and purpose had awakened something in her that she thought was lost forever. The transmission showed the galaxy something they had never seen before. A species that treated individual death as acceptable cost for abstract principles. The humans had not died for territory, resources, or strategic advantage. They had died for concepts like freedom, dignity, and the protection of innocence. More terrifying was the realization that this was not unusual human behavior. The transmission made it clear that every human colony would fight the same way. Every human settlement would turn itself into a fortress. Every human citizen would become a soldier willing to die for their beliefs. Within days, the transmission reached Earth. The planet's response was swift and terrible. Instead of mourning their dead colonists, the humans declared total war against the Kethmoran Empire. They launched the largest military mobilization in their brief interstellar history. Admiral Kyung-ho, Governor Daeho's brother, was placed in command of the human fleet. His first public statement was broadcast throughout human space. "My brother and his people died to show the galaxy what we are. Now we will show the galaxy what we can become. No Kethmoran will escape justice. No raider will threaten human civilians again. We will hunt them across the stars until every last one is dead or surrendering unconditionally." General Su-jin, Dr. So-young's sister, took command of human ground forces. She established what became known as the Soul Doctrine. Any attack on human civilians would result in the complete destruction of the attacking force and their supporting infrastructure. The human fleet that arrived at New Soul 2 days later found only ruins and radiation. But they also found something else: detailed intelligence about their enemies, tactical information about Kethmoran weaknesses, and a complete record of everything that had happened during the siege. The humans did not waste time mourning their dead. They immediately began hunting the Kethmoran fleet. Using the intelligence provided by the New Soul transmission, they tracked Gextar's forces to their next target and arrived before the raiders could attack another colony. The Battle of Kepler Station lasted only 4 hours. The human fleet, armed with knowledge of Kethmoran tactics and burning with desire for revenge, destroyed 31 enemy ships while losing only 3 of their own. Warlord Gextar died when his flagship was boarded by human marines who showed no mercy to raiders who had murdered civilians. But the humans did not stop with revenge. They began systematically hunting down every Kethmoran ship, every raider base, every criminal who had supported the attack on New Sol. Within 6 months, the Kethmoran Empire ceased to exist. The New Sol transmission had become the most watched recording in galactic history. Every species studied it, trying to understand how humans could fight with such intensity. Military academies used it to teach new concepts of warfare. Philosophers debated the implications of a species that valued principles more than survival. 3 major criminal organizations surrendered to local authorities rather than risk human intervention. 5 minor civilizations requested human protection, offering tribute for the privilege of being defended by the species that had turned martyrdom into a military strategy. Belthera realized that she had witnessed the birth of a new type of galactic power. The humans did not rule through conquest or economic dominance. They ruled through reputation, through the fear of what they were willing to sacrifice for their beliefs. The galaxy had learned a simple lesson. Humans could be defeated, but they could not be conquered. They would always remember their dead, and they would always seek justice for crimes against innocent people. New Sol was gone, but its legacy lived forever. The humans had shown the galaxy what they were, and nothing would ever be the same. 6 months after the destruction of New Sol, Commander Velthara stood before the Galactic Council on the planet Nexus Prime. The Great Chamber was filled with representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy. They had all seen the New Sol transmission. They all wanted to understand what it meant for the future of galactic politics. Belthera had spent months preparing her report, but she knew that no amount of preparation could fully explain what she had witnessed. How could she make them understand that they had watched the birth of the galaxy's apex predators? Honored council members, Velthara began, you have asked me to assess the threat level posed by the human species. After extensive observation and analysis, I must report that we have been asking the wrong question. The chamber fell silent. Representatives from dozens of species leaned forward to hear her words. We asked whether humans could fight, Velthara continued. We should have asked whether we want them to fight. Because once humanity decides you are their enemy, they do not stop until you are extinct or surrendering unconditionally. The Centauri ambassador interrupted. Commander, surely you exaggerate. We have seen the transmission from New Sol. The humans were brave, but they were also defeated. How does one failed colony make them a galactic threat? Velthara activated a holographic display showing star charts of the former Kethmoran Empire. 6 months ago, the Kethmoran controlled 47 star systems. They had over 200 warships and ruled through fear and brutality. Today, they no longer exist. The display showed the systematic destruction of Kethmoran forces throughout the galaxy. Admiral Kyung-ho and General Su Jin had led human forces in a campaign of total warfare that eliminated not just the raiders who attacked New Sol, but every criminal organization that had ever supported them. The humans did not simply seek revenge, Velthara explained. They conducted what they call a crusade. They hunted down every Kethmoran ship, every raider base, every individual who had participated in attacks on civilian populations. They showed no mercy, accepted no surrender, and offered no negotiation. The Vegan representative spoke up. This confirms our fears about human aggression. They appear to be a species driven by violence and hatred. No, Velthara replied firmly. That is exactly the wrong conclusion. Humans are not driven by violence. They are driven by something far more dangerous. Principles. She changed the display to show human colonies throughout the galaxy. In the 6 months since New Sol, humanity had established 12 new settlements. Each one was heavily fortified and defended by citizens trained in combat. But they were also centers of learning, art, and peaceful development. Humans fight for abstract concepts that most species abandoned as primitive, Velthara explained. They fight for freedom, justice, and the protection of innocence. They do not seek conquest or resources. They seek to ensure that no one can threaten their people without facing terrible consequences. The display showed recent human diplomatic activities. 5 minor civilizations had requested human protection after their governments collapsed. 3 criminal organizations had dissolved rather than risk human intervention. Even the powerful hegemony of worlds had begun negotiating trade agreements with humanity, treating them as equals despite their recent arrival on the galactic stage. The humans have become the galaxy's unofficial peacekeepers, Velthara continued, not through conquest but through reputation. The mere threat of human intervention now ends conflicts before they begin. She showed recordings of recent events throughout the galaxy. Pirates who had raided civilian ships for decades had suddenly stopped their attacks. Slavers who had operated openly were now hiding in the deepest regions of space. Corrupt governments were implementing reforms to avoid attracting human attention. Fear of human retaliation is reshaping galactic civilization, Velthara observed. Criminal organizations are disbanding. Corrupt officials are resigning. Even legitimate governments are treating their citizens better to avoid being seen as oppressive. The Altarian ambassador asked the question that everyone was thinking. What do you recommend we do about this human threat? Velthara was quiet for a long moment. Then she activated a new display showing diplomatic communications between humanity and other species. I recommend that we do everything possible to remain on humanity's good side, she said, because they have demonstrated something that no other species in galactic history has achieved. They have weaponized their own mortality. The display showed statistical analysis of human military doctrine. Unlike other species, humans did not try to minimize casualties in their own forces. Instead, they maximized damage to their enemies, even at the cost of their own lives. Every other species fights to survive, Velthara explained. Humans fight to win even if winning means dying. This makes them unpredictable and extremely dangerous. You cannot negotiate with someone who values abstract principles more than their own life. She showed recordings of recent human military actions. In each case, human forces had accepted heavy casualties to achieve tactical objectives that other species would have considered too costly. Humans treat individual death as an acceptable cost for group victory, Velthara continued. They will sacrifice valuable personnel to achieve minor tactical advantages. They will destroy their own resources to deny them to enemies. They will fight hopeless battles if they believe the fight itself has value. The chamber erupted in confused discussion. Representatives from various species argued about whether humans were insane, evil, or simply incomprehensible. Velthara waited for quiet, then continued her presentation. I have received personal communications from Admiral Kyung-ho, the commander of human naval forces. His message is simple. Humanity remembers its friends as carefully as it remembers its enemies. She displayed the message from Admiral Kyung-ho. It was brief and polite, but carried an unmistakable undertone of power. Commander Velthara, the human government thanks the Altarian Republic for maintaining neutrality during the New Sol incident. Your decision to observe rather than interfere is noted and respected. However, we are aware that you witnessed everything that happened to our people. We hope that your report will help other species understand that humans do not seek conflict, but we do not avoid it when justice requires action. The message continued. Humanity seeks peaceful relationships with all civilized species. We offer friendship, trade, and mutual protection to those who share our values of freedom and justice. But those who threaten innocent people, regardless of species, will face the full force of human retaliation. Velthara looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. The humans are offering us a choice. We can be their friends, or we can be their enemies. There is no neutral ground. The Centauri ambassador asked, What if we simply avoid contact with humans altogether? Velthara smiled grimly. That option no longer exists. Humanity is expanding rapidly throughout the galaxy. They are establishing colonies, trade routes, and diplomatic relationships. Within 10 years, every major civilization will have to decide how to deal with human presence. She showed projections of human expansion. Unlike most species, humans were not limiting themselves to easily habitable planets. They were terraforming hostile worlds, establishing research stations in dangerous regions, and building settlements in areas that other species had written off as uninhabitable. Humans are not just another galactic power, Velthara concluded. They are a new type of civilization entirely. They combine advanced technology with primitive emotions, rational planning with irrational courage, peaceful intentions with unlimited capacity for violence. The final part of her presentation showed what had happened to species that had tried to test human resolve since New Sol. 3 different criminal groups had attempted raids on human settlements. All 3 had been completely destroyed within weeks. The humans have established a simple rule, Velthara explained. Any attack on human civilians will result in total war. They do not negotiate with terrorists, they do not accept partial surrender, and they do not forgive attacks on innocents. She concluded her presentation with a personal observation. I have studied dozens of species over my career. I have seen civilizations rise and fall, watched empires expand and collapse, but I have never encountered a species like humanity. They are not the strongest species in the galaxy, nor the most technologically advanced, but they are the most dangerous because they have something that we have lost, the willingness to die for their beliefs. And that makes them effectively unstoppable. The chamber fell silent as the full implications of Velthara's report sank in. The galaxy had gained a new apex predator, one that could not be defeated through conventional means. 3 days later, the Galactic Council passed Resolution 23877, formally recognizing humanity as a sovereign interstellar power. The resolution included special provisions acknowledging human territorial claims and recommending that all member species establish diplomatic relations with Earth. Within a year, humanity had been invited to join the Galactic Council as a full member. They accepted, but made it clear that their membership came with conditions. They would not tolerate attacks on civilians by any species, and they reserved the right to intervene militarily in cases of genocide or